Can a building be great even if it doesn't shock the world? Coming up on Architecture CodeX.
Architecture CodeX. If you want to see more, subscribe.
Great architects don't always make history, but they will demonstrate their superior design skill even on less significant projects. Rafael Viñoly made history with his residential tower in New York City, 432 Park Avenue, which I praised heavily in Architecture Codex video number 12. It was the first of the pencil buildings that really impacted the 21st century New York City skyline, and it was done with modern elegance. But at 125 Greenwich Avenue in Lower Manhattan, Viñoly shows us he does not need to shock in order to make great architecture. In reversing the trend to build tall, Viñoly architects requested bigger floor plates and gave up the right to build the second tallest building in this section of Lower Manhattan. Presumably this was done with the developer, and so one should not interpret this as architectural virtue. In fact, the first design Viñoly did was for a tower 1,356 feet tall and originally built as the sibling to 432 Park. It would have been perfectly straight, contained 128 units, and rivaled World Trade I, only 400 feet shorter. But in 2014, when ownership of the land changed to Busy and Partners, it seems they went back to the drawing board and came back with a shorter version and more units, 272 apartments. This version contains studio units at the affordable price of $1.3 million. So while the real reason for the major shift in the design remains hidden, we could guess it involved maximizing return on investment. That's okay. Architecture is not purely science or art. It is a balance of forces, economic and natural, and of style and construction techniques. Any good architect can design a few different solutions for any given site and program, and the full impact of the design may not be appreciated by the client until it is almost done. Here's where the approval of the client is essential for any project to move forward. The trick is to get client approval without compromising the architectural principles. If a client does not like a design of mine, I will make changes. What I won't do is have them tell me what changes to make, as the client may not fully appreciate all the architectural principles that are involved. Mies van der Rohe said, "Never listen to the client because they don't know what is possible and what is impossible." I will listen to any good idea, no matter what the source is, but incorporating that into a design is often more complicated. It is no accident that Rubik's Cube was invented by an architect who was trying to demonstrate to his architectural students how when you change one thing, many other things might be affected. So regardless of how we went from 1,356 feet tall to 912 feet tall, we can evaluate the design as built. And even though the base of the building is still under construction, many of the units are already occupied and the scaffolding is down. So it is possible for me to be fair. The tower is structurally supported by two eye-shaped concrete core columns, which manifest as solid vertical elements on the tower's north and south facades. The perpendicular elements of each I-beam, or more accurately I-column, create the structural shear walls that keep the building up and from blowing over in the wind. I like truth, and structural expression is truth. So the exposed concrete, to me, is a wonderful design feature that expresses the nature of the building. I find it engaging, and I like how they are consistent, even through the mechanical floors. There are obviously occasional penetrations through these cores inside, but the two eyes acting together are the structure from which the glass facades are hung. Without these concrete walls, the east and west facades could not be so gloriously glazed. It is this simple, dignified structural expression that puts this building up there with the Seagram's building in New York City, John Hancock Tower in Chicago, the Pompidou Center in Paris, and Viñoly's own 432 Park. At 432 Park, the mechanical blow-through floors were new and were disguised behind the facades rigid 10-foot by 10-foot grid. At 125 Greenwich, the facade is interrupted, giving an intriguing break and creating two distinct sections of residential space. Both the residential sections are curved and set back from the street. The curved glazed corners is a softening element, putting the reflecting glass in greater contrast to the hard vertical concrete eyes, the hexagonal mechanical floors, and the street rigid geometry at the base of the podium. The base, still under construction, extends fully out to the sidewalk. The design is elegant and distinctive without being crazy, so I give it a thumbs up. But foolishly, I read comments on a few of the articles where critics regard the building as extremely ugly. Now, I realize they grew up in a world where everyone got participation trophies, so they think their opinion matters, regardless of how little information, intellectual capacity, or talent they might have. Welcome to the internet. Often they cite the exposed concrete shear walls as not being harmonious because the concrete doesn't match the glass. Some think the concrete shear walls need to be more jarring for this to be creative architecture. In other words, they have picked out one thing that makes this building really good and apparently do not understand it. They do not understand that form is a structural necessity responding to the laws of physics. If architecture to you is merely about decoration, maybe you should keep your opinion to yourself. Now, I recognize that I am an architectural snob, having practiced architecture, and therefore I do know more about it than most people. And Rafael Viñoly is no longer with us, so he doesn't have to hear these critics. But if he did, I would pass along to him the advice I got as a young man. When people who cannot do what you can do criticize you, consider the source. Among the purposes of this channel is to bring this kind of insight to you so you can have an informed, erudite opinion and, of course, impress your friends at parties. But also the channel wants to spread the gospel of good architecture so you can get a greater appreciation of different styles of architecture that you might not have liked otherwise. So I would not expect you to agree with me upon everything. In fact, that would be rather boring. But after seeing a dozen or so of my videos, I would hope that you have developed enough understanding that you can make an argument for or against a building with something more than just the vapid and puerile, I know what I like. You know, maybe I should issue certificates of participation. The variety of influences and problems that go along with building a building are immense, which is why it is a skill that takes years to acquire and why architects, engineers, craftspeople, and contractors dedicate so much of their life to it. To produce these videos, I go to the site, do extensive research, and draw upon my lifelong skills in order to give you insights for your consideration. I know I make architectural criticism look easy, but I am a professional. Please, please do not try this at home. I'm Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture Codex.